Today I'm making just a short video about what are called the mystery religions or the mystery cults. There was a various number of these cults in the Greco-Roman world that offered individuals religious experiences that were not provided by the public religions. Most of these had originated in tribal ceremonies that were often performed by various people groups in the world. But in the tribal ceremonies, almost every member of the clan was a participant. But when we get to Greece, initiation, and there was always initiation into the group, was a matter of individual choice. So some of the gods and goddesses worshipped were Dionysus. This was worshipped in almost every Greek city. Dionysus is the god of fruitfulness and vegetation, and especially wine. So the Dionysiac festivals were particularly popular because there was lots of drinking and sexual activity, but also such things as choral singing and mimes and other activities. Another god had an important sanctuary in the city of Eleusis, that's near Athens in Greece, and that was the goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone. And Demeter is the goddess of grain, and there is a whole mythology about the goddess of grain and her daughter and how they represent the winter and then the replenishing of the earth in the springtime. At first, the cult of Demeter was local, and initiation was a tribal affair rather than personal. But this was changed when Eleusis was annexed to be part of Athens territory about 600 BC. Initiation then lost its importance as becoming important in civic affairs, and it became a purely religious ceremony. So once the mystery rite was no longer a tribal ceremony, each person had to decide himself whether or not they wanted to be initiated. Well, the great period, or the greatest period of the mystery religions, began when Rome was able to impose peace on the Mediterranean world. And at that time, the Dionysiac cult was extremely popular. It flourished in the whole empire. The national religions of the Greek Orient, in their Hellenized versions, the Greek version of these religions spread. There was a faintly exotic flavor that surrounded these religions and made them particularly attractive. The most popular of the Oriental mysteries was the mystery religion that surrounded Isis and the cult of Isis. Far less important, but also there was the influence of cults from Asia Minor. By 200 BC, the great mother of the gods, Magna Mater, and her consort Attis were introduced into the Roman pantheon and were now considered as Roman gods. And this cult had been encouraged especially under Emperor Claudius at about AD 50. The great mother goddess was characterized by her universal motherhood, especially over wild nature. And then we had the Persian god Mithra, or Mithras, the god of light. This god was introduced much later, probably not before the 2nd century. The cult of Mithra was concerned with the origin of life from a sacred bull, which was caught and sacrificed by Mithra. And according to Persian sources, the bull, by its death, gave birth to the sky, the planets, the earth, the animals, and the plants. And thus, Mithra in this cult was the creator of life. And from Syria were several other deities that were worshipped. The height of Syrian influence was in the 3rd century AD, when Sol, the Syrian sun god, was on the verge of becoming the chief god of the Roman Empire. He was introduced into Rome in about AD 220, and the Emperor Aurelian, who ruled from 270 to 275, elevated the sun god to the highest rank among the gods. Sanctuaries to the sun and gods of the other planets were constructed, and even the Emperor Constantine the Great, some 50 years later, is said to have wavered between Sol, the god of the sun, and Christ. And for some time, his religious policy was devised so as to allow the coexistence of both of those religions. But finally, Christianity was accepted as the official religion. The different mysteries were not exclusive of one another, but they did appeal to different economic or sociological groups. The middle class of the Greek and Roman cities preferred the Dionysian societies, the festivals that were a cult of beauty and merrymaking. Isis was worshipped by the lower middle class people in the seaports and the trading towns. The followers of the Great Mother in Italy were principally crafts people. Mithra was the god of soldiers, of imperial officials, and of freedom. Now, there were no special societies for slaves, but they were usually admitted to any of the societies that they had interested in, because during the time of the festivals of the societies, at least, all men were considered equal. When one wanted to become a member of one of the mystery religions, there would be a period of preparation that preceded the initiation in each of them, and they differed, of course. In the Isis religion, for example, there was a period of 11 days of fasting that included abstinence from meat, wine, and sexual activity, and that was a requirement before the initiation ceremony. And these candidates in the Isis cult were segregated from the common people in special apartments in a holy precinct of the community center. It was called, they were called the chastely living ones. In all of the mystery religions, the candidates were sworn to secrecy. They could not tell about the rites or what happened in their ceremonies. The oath of the Isis mysteries is preserved on papyrus. Before initiation, a confession of sins was expected, and the candidate sometimes put this in a narrative form and told their whole story and confessed the sins and their faults up until the time of their baptism. And baptism was a common part of the initiation ceremony, the community would listen to the sins of the person being initiated, and it was believed that the rite of baptism would wash away all of the candidate's sin, and from that point on, his life would be changed because he had enrolled himself in the service of the Savior God. In the ceremonies of Mithra, there were 7 degrees of initiations. The English names would be raven, bridegroom, soldier, lion, Persian, courier of the sun, and father. And those in the lowest ranks, the raven, certainly that rank and possibly the next, were servants of the community during the sacred meal of bread and water that would form part of the rite. I'm going to share more about Mithra and the Mithriac ceremonies in a later video. Initiation ceremonies, just like the baptism that we see in other religions, usually were a metaphor for death and resurrection, often done in a very extravagant manner. The meetings of the mystery clubs were often named after the common meal, and that was very much a part of their meeting. The cult of Dionysus, their meetings were called stebas. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. That was the word for straw, because the participants ate their dinner sitting on straw. And the meals for the followers of Serapis and Attis were called couch, because the diners lay on couches. In the religion of sun worship of the sun god, the festivals were based on astronomy, and the greatest festival was held on December 24th and 25th at the time of the winter solstice. Because from this date the length of the day began to increase, this was regarded as the day of the rebirth of the god and the beginning of new life, the renovation of life. The mystery communities had hymns that they sang, prayers that they said, but almost nothing of them has been preserved. We do have a text of 40 sentences related to Isis, where the goddess Isis reveals herself. This text has been found at 4 different and geographically distant places. So this indicates that it was probably exhibited in every Isis sanctuary. Examples of the miracles that the god performed were preserved in temple libraries, and examples of these narratives, some on papyrus and some on stone, a few have been found. So, what about theology in the mystery religions? Well, they never developed established creeds, as was later done in the Christian creeds, but they certainly could be said to have a form of theology. One of the central subjects in the mystery writings was cosmogony, that is, the theory of the origin or the creation of the world. And another important theological discussion was, of course, always the soul, the myth of the soul and its celestial home and fall, and how the soul is redeemed or returned to its source. There is a beautifully told story in it's called The Hymn of the Soul. It's in a work called the Acts of Thomas. That's an apocryphal work that tells about the Apostle Thomas and his adventures and eventually his death. And there is a hero in this Hymn of the Soul who represents the soul of man, is born in an Eastern kingdom beyond our world, is sent here, and it's the story of his journey on earth and return to the celestial world where he was born. Many of the questions that would later be the subjects of Christian theological discussions were already being debated in the mystery religions. You know, for many Greeks and Romans, astrology was the only sensible method for studying man's life and fortune. And they believed that the stars and the planets determined everything about life. But for some people, the idea that men had no free will and could achieve nothing on their own was frightening. And they wanted a different approach. And these mystery religions provided that approach. The theology of the mystery religions admitted that the stars ruled the world, and especially the planets could have evil influences on people. But the highest god of the religion, for example, Serapis in the Isis mysteries, stood far above the stars. The final god, the ultimate absolute reality, would be above the stars and was their master. And a man who decided to become a servant of this God would step out of this circle of determination and would have entered into the sphere of liberty. So there would be some free will. The God could suspend the determinism of the planets and the stars ruling life and could save his servant from illness, prolong his life, even against the will of the stars, the will of fate. In the Isis mysteries, there was also a theology of what we could call grace that foreshadowed the Christian doctrine. In many of the mystery cults, there was a marked tendency toward the worship of one God without denying the existence that there were other gods. So Isis would be the essence of all of the pagan goddesses. Now, there was in the religion of the sun god an elaborate theology was developed to show that all the known gods of all the nations were nothing more than provisional names for the sun god. So this included Zeus and Pluto and Dionysius. It also included Yahweh, the name of the God of the Jewish people. So all of the nations really worshiped the same God, just with additional names, local names. Well, that's a little bit about the mystery religions. I'm going to go more deeply into the conflict between the mystery religions and Christianity and some of the major differences between the two, but that has probably become evident as I've talked about some of the things that the mystery religions believed. I will say in closing, however, that even in the public religions, such as Judaism and Christianity, there have always been the exoteric, the public presentation of the religion to the masses of people, and the esoteric or the private additional teachings of the religion that are only for initiates. An example of this would be the teachings of the various societies of monks in Roman Catholicism and in the Orthodox Church or Eastern Orthodox churches, which are not, or in the past have not been, public knowledge. The Hindu and the Buddhist religions, and even the Islamic faith and Judaism, of course, all have segments of the faith that are esoteric, that are not taught to the general public. And so that is something borrowed from mystery religions or just a natural part of faiths when people want to go deeper, farther on in their faith, far, far beyond what is general public interest. So we'll look at that as well, the esoteric teachings of Christianity and how they too differ from the public teaching in the general masses for the people in church on the Sabbath. So I hope that you learned something in this video, and I appreciate your watching. If you like talking about subjects like this, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell, and that tells YouTube that there is interest, and I get a bit more sharing and responses to searching in that way, and it helps to build this channel so that more people can learn about these subjects. So thank you for your support, and I'll do my best to upload again next Saturday, another blast from the past, something about how spiritual thought and religious thought developed over the ages. Between now and then, I hope you have a great week and stay safe and healthy. I'll see you soon.